Terry, and thank you everyone for joining this chat today. I'm really excited to talk to you about the future of recruiting, how to master all things virtual. And pardon my technology just a little bit. All right, so we're gonna actually start off with a poll. Before I get into this, I think we really wanna take a pulse on how you are prepared for virtual programming this fall. And there it is, there's the poll. So do you feel you're extremely prepared, somewhat prepared, well on my way, not prepared at all at this time? Would be interesting. You know, just want to get a pulse on how you guys are feeling. I know this is you from all over the country. I'm in New York City right now, so we are still in phase one. So just kind of getting a pulse on that, and hopefully have some takeaways no matter what environment you're in. So it looks like we are topping at somewhat prepared, well on my way, to still working on it, have a ways to go. And I just want to point out that nobody is extremely well prepared, all set. And I think that's completely okay. Anyone I've talked to, no one is extremely prepared and all set to go. We are as good as we can be, but this is great to hear. And I know I'm not too surprised by this. So before we really, so with that poll being said, and all of this technology, right, here I am talking about the virtual all things recruiting, and we, you know, as your students are going to find, every employer is on a completely different platform. So our group uses Teams, all of IPG Mediabrands. With Zoom, I'm not as acclimated with, so bear with me. We may have some technical difficulties during this journey. So really wanted to set the stage before I get into IPG Mediabrands, who we are, and kind of, you know, what kind of tips and tricks I can offer you. I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about myself. I have a very interesting story. So I graduated during the last recession. And Terry and I always talk about this, just how did you get from point A to point B? And this slide really explains it perfectly. Expectations versus reality, right? You think you're gonna land your dream job and you're just gonna skyrocket from there, and that doesn't happen. I'm the first to say that. I still have my dream job, but I don't think I knew what my dream job was until I have it now. So I started off at a SUNY, State University of New York School of New Paltz. I was an art history major with a visual arts concentration. Thought it was either gonna, you know, curate a museum or be the next Andy Warhol. This was, you know, 2009, really coming out of school with a lot of debt. And an art history major. So not a lot of money there. You know, had to go home a bit with my tail between my legs, thinking, hey, what am I going to do now? People aren't going to pay for my work. We're in a recession. Museums are shutting down. You know, I don't know what I'm going to do. So that being said, you know, biggest thing is paying off debt, right? Making that money. I was able to have an opportunity. Started off a friend of mine in night auditing for a hotel, learned hospitality, learned a little bit of accounting, realized that was not what I wanted to do. This is awful, but got some experience from that. And I think through all of these experiences, you learn the silver lining. So next up, I had worked in retail my entire college career, and have always been into sports and athletics. So one of my favorite brands, Oakley, was hiring for an assistant manager position. I'm like, hey, you know, can get some experience here from a management standpoint, figure out what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll go back and get my master's. Well, turns out Oakley was a great environment to work for, had a really solid training program, manager training program. And I stuck with them for about 7 years and was really able to grow my career there. So I, you know, was an assistant manager in Syracuse, New York. They moved me to Boston. I ran my own store, and there I was able to really get my teeth into, sink my teeth into training, recruiting. I was helping other stores training and recruiting, and really staffing them up. A lot of the recruiting was left to the stores themselves when you're in retail. Also learned, you know, payroll, procurement, all of the, you know, back end things that you wouldn't think just simply working in retail you get. I almost felt like I got a second business degree. So through that, I was promoted again and landed in New York City. My ultimate dream, you know, many years later, 8 years later, and it was opening the flag store on Fifth Avenue, traveling all over the country, training, but ultimately couldn't do the hours, you know, New Year's Eve, Christmas Day, and really just wanted to change and transition. Now that I had identified and really taken all of these tools and things throughout, was able to transition into more of a corporate career. I knew I wanted to be a recruiter. So back it up, the first person who had hired me at Oakley 7 years ago had left the organization to go to a staffing agency. and reached out. She knew I had been doing this at Oakley and asked me to come in and interview. And, you know, a long story short, you know, 5-6 years later, I'm here, you know, was able to get exposure in media. When I was with the staffing agency, saw a lot of different agencies, worked for many clients, you know, Deloitte to Valentino, Versace, and really just had an understanding of what that looked like. And even though recruiting for accounting and finance maybe wasn't the most glamorous thing, I was able to take all of those tools and those relationship buildings to get to the next step. So now here I am with you, you know, having led campus programs, partnerships, building internship programs from the ground up, making an impact not only in the organizations, but in the students, lives, and not just students, right? I've recruited for all sorts of things. And in general, having that sense of satisfaction when you know you're changing somebody's life by offering them a job is truly a passion of mine, and I'm able to do that. So, you know, with your students in this story, I think my biggest point is we're always changing. We always have to evolve. And just understanding that I can relate to you from a career services standpoint, but I understand what these students are going through, having no job and not being able to in an uncertain environment. So yeah. So let's get started. Oh, technology. So just an overview of the presentation today. I'm going to discuss IPG Mediabrands overview. I'm going to go over the COVID landscape. I'm going to go over evolving in a virtual world. And then finally, gaining an experience in the current market. So you can take all of these tips and tricks back to your students. And one thing I will say is we are in a very evolving climate. So some of this stuff may be relevant today. It may not be relevant tomorrow, you know, all the information. But either way, some of the takeaways you can use in a completely virtual environment, you can use in a hybrid environment, or you could use it on campus. So. Yeah, so IPG Mediabrands, massive organization. Interpublic Group, which is our parent company, is an advertising organization that consists of 5 major networks. Just so you're familiar, I don't know if you've heard of maybe FCB, McCann World Group, Mullen & Lowe, marketing specialists. They also have many independent specialty agencies underneath them. We are one of the 5 major networks as IPG Mediabrands. We consider ourselves dynamic, empowered, entrepreneurial, and made up of 10,500 marketing, communications, media, technology specialists. We are in over 130 countries. So just to kind of give a perspective on how large we are, if you think of a Russian doll, we, you know, IPG Mediabrands is at the top, and then you've got these sub networks underneath that in turn have agencies that are part of their networks. So that's, you know, I work for IPG Mediabrands. And interesting enough, last year, Mediabrand launched Kinesso and Matterkind, which is our marketing intelligence engine powered by Axiom. This is really IPG Mediabrand's foundational data and technology layer. Another big reason I'm showing you this landscape is for your students, right? There are many different opportunities in marketing and advertising and ad tech. And as you're going back and looking for opportunities for them, these are some things that maybe they weren't aware of pre-graduation. So underneath Mediabrand's network, we have our 2 front door agencies. So if you know anything about advertising, these are really the media buying and media planning. They go out and they drive the clients. So we've got and Initiative. They're bringing in the Amazons, the Coca-Colas. And then we have specialty agencies that partner with and Initiative that are really able to provide specialty services in order to give the client the best service and the best portfolio of marketing tactics to reach their consumer. So you've got Magna, which is our investment intelligence and innovation unit. You've got Helix that specializes in pharma and in healthcare, which is actually booming right now. You'd be surprised because of everything with COVID. You have Reprise, which is our digital performance, paid search and social unit. You've got Rapport, which is our digital out of home and digital out of home unit. Really think like billboards, buses, things like that. And then finally, you've got Orion, our financial savings and asset optimization solution. So all of these different brands partner together. And just to give you a snapshot of our client roster, you know, we work with hundreds more, but these are some of the big names that we work with across all brands. Yeah, so recruitment pre and post COVID 2019. I really want to paint a picture for you of what our recruitment process looked like. Some of this is best case scenario, some of it isn't, but just so you kind of understand from a large organization. And because I do touch all the brands on the early career and campus side, we had certain processes set up in place, but wanted to give you an overview and how we quickly had to pivot. So, pre-COVID, we had a dedicated early career recruitment team. So this team was dedicated to campus partnerships. They were dedicated to internships and entry-level recruitment. So we did have that in place already, which helped out a lot. From a volume perspective, at any given time, all of the agencies could be recruiting on 300 plus roles. We always had thousands of applicants. We were staffing up for 200 internships this summer across the United States. We did have some virtual practices already in place. One of the things we rolled out this year, specifically catered to our internship program, was one-way virtual screens. It made the application process a lot more efficient. Students were asked basic questions, and that way we were able to see a much larger candidate pool and expose ourselves to talent all over the country. We were using live interviews as well, and that was across all recruitment, not just early career, so mid to senior level as well. We weren't, the percentage I couldn't tell you, maybe 15-20%. Most of our our interviews were still in person, but we did have that platform. And then virtual information sessions. So we were starting to work with campuses and having these virtual information sessions that couldn't come to New York City. So the students could, still see the office virtually, meet with teams, and hear about who we are and what we do. We were also in process of planning different case studies and working with professors to provide value into their classrooms and for us to build out a talent pipeline. So things changed overnight. Just to give you perspective, what the change looked like for us, that first week that we were, I think it was the week of St. Patrick's Day, we had planned the second 2 weeks in March to have our interview super days across the country. So those are the days where we'd have 50-60 students per brand come in, and they would interview with the team, see the office, and then we would make our decision and staff up our internship program. Some students were abroad, or maybe were coming home to New York City or a different city for the summer. So we had some virtual planning, but I'd say maybe 10%. 90% of this was to be done in person. And one of our first weeks was the same week we had to shut down and go completely virtual. We were successful. I think I drive that success, number one, to the team. Moving very quickly and pivoting in hours and days and not weeks, but additionally being extremely and over communicative, right? So being able to contact the students with one-sheeters, which I'll get into later, making sure they're set up for tech, making sure they know what times their interviews are. And same for us as an employer or as a campus career services, making sure your programs are set up and being prepared so people are better able to do that. So, we were very successful. I think we had identified around 80% before they canceled our internship program. But just the sheer volume, when I say it almost went off without a hitch, it literally almost went off without a hitch. And I have 3 people on my team, and they worked like no other for this part. So it was absolutely fantastic. Again, this is the best case scenario. I don't want to say all employers are like this, but even for you as career services professionals, this is something to really think about. And if you are on that, still working on it, have a ways to go, really think about those campus programs and how you can make that shift over ahead of time, because you do have the time to pivot a little bit more than we did, at least at the beginning of COVID. So next up, wanted to just give you the COVID landscape, right? The class of 2020 started its senior year in boom time. The national unemployment rate at near record low of 3.7%. But because of the bust driven by COVID-19, now 4 million grads are entering the worst job market since the Great Depression. So, just to drive it home, national unemployment right now is 14.7%. And rates for recent grads are actually far worse at 25.7%. And, I think those are really daunting numbers. And, hopefully once we're past this health crisis, things will go up, but we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's kind of controlling your controllables and understand. And an old manager told me that And I stick to it to this day, and just getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. For us, it's constantly being able to pivot, and we know now virtually, it removes a lot of the barriers, and incorporating that, even if you were to go back, and we weren't all social distancing, or if you're currently in a city that is no longer doing that, you still can use these practices as well. So how do we evolve in a virtual world? I think that's a big question. It's constantly changing. I've said it a million times in the past 2 minutes, but how do we evolve? How do we do this? Reimagining employer and campus engagement. Reimagine, reimagine, reimagine. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. With technology, barriers have been removed, and students and campuses are able to gain a lot more exposure. So reimagine events and networking sessions, campus interviews, partnerships, and reimagining how to empower students and take action. Light at the end of the tunnel for IPG Mediabrands. They're telling us, we are returning to the office no later than September 8th. So just to kind of give you a real snapshot perspective on what we're going through on our end. Who knows if that's actually the case or not, especially because we're in New York City. But for us, it could be different across the board. So reimagining networking sessions. So students will be looking for ways to connect with their peers. You have the opportunity to lead the conversation and flow of information. Now more than ever, there's a lot of uncertainty, and they're going to be turning to you and their schools for guidance. Take advantage of that and reimagine the way you could do that. So virtual employer informational sessions, we were doing that already. That's something I would press now more than ever. Reimagining what that looks like, whether it's using different technology platforms to do breakout sessions. I know Zoom has that capability. Virtual case studies, really partnering with your professors and getting the students exposure in the classroom to choose various employers and opportunities, and helping them learn about what's going on real world right now, working virtually. And then also panels. So a big thing, reimagining the way that these work, whether they're current events, wellness, or social activities. These are ways to engage students and bring them back to you, because of course they're going to be looking for career services, but they're also looking at the end of the day to connect. This generation, I can't tell you, even the recent grads that are on my team, they want to go back to the office. They miss that social interaction. So being able to really curate that and giving them positive advice, and whether it's wellness, current events, or social activities, can really drive it a long way and gain their trust. So reimagining campus interviews. First and foremost, removing those barriers. I've said it 10 times, but having this technology and being able to use it really makes a difference, whether the student is in San Francisco and they're interviewing in Texas. I heard somebody is from Texas on this call. Fantastic. You're able to remove that. Maybe they're from Texas and went to San Francisco and can't get back to interview, or vice versa. Or you have an employer that they're really interested in and they can't connect. Or international. You have students going for international business degrees. This is an opportunity. It's been there, but now it's an opportunity to really step up and use the platform. Increase in candidate employer exposure. And then really just ultimately allowing flexibility. In the past, if you had on-campus events or anything, or interviews, students were restricted to a certain amount of time. And of course you can guide it by a certain interview day or something like that. But if the student has to go back to work, or they're working part-time, at a restaurant, they can cater it around their shift and hop into that virtual interview and hop out. So, just thinking of other ways that you can help the students and really be able to allow them the most opportunity. So big one, reimagining partnerships as well too. And I'm sure all of you have your corporate partnerships and alumni partnerships, but really understanding that engagement piece and getting to use that more. When we were in the office, my colleagues would come to me from all of the brands, really excited when somebody from their alma mater had reached out. Don't be afraid to ask. I think that ultimately with these different partnerships, people now more than ever are willing to help support, especially because jobs aren't available. So with mentorship programs, coffee chats, having somebody speak with the student, really just going out there and asking them and going back and saying, hey, we're going through this unprecedented time. Can you talk about your industry with our students and what you're doing? It can really make a difference. And the biggest thing really, empowering students to take action. So alumni outreach, plan panels and events based on interests, and execution ownership. So with the alumni outreach, what I will say is, empower the students to do that along, the worst the alumni is too busy and won't respond, but it's better to go out there than not to have done it at all. Planning panels and events based on interests, take a pulse on them. What are they looking for to see? What kind of information during these times? A lot of this is unprecedented. Putting those panels together, just having those open discussions really can get to a place of potential healing and potential execution and helping them in their career. And then finally, having that ownership on the execution piece of it. Encourage them to run the panels. Encourage them to set up things. That way they have a piece of it and they're invested, right? You're capturing their attention. So student and employer engagement. So a few things I'm going to run through in this section is outreach and social media and a virtual interview guide. So for outreach and social media, again, I've mentioned the alumni piece. I think I've driven it home to the most part, but really leveraging that, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's via email, but just reaching out and saying, hey, I want to learn more about you. That really ties into, you see on this slide, utilizing social media and platforms. With LinkedIn especially, one of the interesting things, if students start to follow certain organizations, or the organizations are interested, not certain, any of them, the recruiters in those organizations, when we're running searches, can see who is following us. If we're looking for a profile, there's a box that popped up and says, oh, 20 of these people that you search for are following your organization. And it's a gauge to say, oh, wow, these people are actually interested. So we can see that on our end, but more importantly for the students, they're staying up to date on current events within the company. There's any kind of big mergers, acquisitions, whatever the case is, and sales. They're really able to have that information. So when they do have those coffee chats, it's not just light conversation. They're able to dig in and figure out if it's an organization they want to be with, and really seeing other experiences and points of view. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, follow the companies. All these companies are posting social awareness, COVID, you name it. The information's out there. It's theirs for the taking. So my favorite, a virtual interview guide. So with this, this is a very light version of what we gave the students when we were doing our interview day, and I really wanted to bring that to you. So I'll leave this slide up for a little bit longer than the others. But one of the big things that we had for them, and you as a career services individual can provide, is just a check sheet, a one-sheeter. Hey, I did this. I didn't even think I should have done this, but I'm glad I did it. In order for them to be prepared for interviews, for virtual sessions, whatever the case may be. So first and foremost, I can't stress enough, have the students and even yourselves test the tech ahead of time. You have a phone, download all the apps just in case. Every employer, every campus uses a different platform. There's so many right now, might as well put it on the phone, if not the computer. So Skype, Zoom, Hangouts, you name it, download it. Also have a backup phone. I've noticed that, I don't know about you, but if my internet's bad, if I go on my cell phone, it works better oftentimes than my computer. And then additionally, I don't have as many firewalls on my cell phone. So that the app is just gonna launch and work versus, my speaker's not working, my camera not turning on. You're able to just better to control the technology piece. So backup. Also, always send the phone number to the person that you're speaking with, just in case for a scenario you can hop on a call, right? It's better to have a conversation over a phone than not at all. So next thing I would suggest is research. So this is something I'm always driving into the students I mentor. Research the company, research the jobs you're looking at, and research the interviewers on LinkedIn to find, see what their career path is, ask questions, and really just doing their due diligence on the back end. They're coming in already with very little experience. If they can show that initiative and really being able to show that they have an interest in the company and they know what's going on in the industry, it makes a big difference and will separate them from the rest. So so with that research piece. And then finally, environment and the tone of the interview. So know that, so oftentimes we think the student or the campus, but also know that some of the people they're talking to on the other end, this may be their first time virtually interviewing too. So the student needs to do what they can to control the environment, whether it's, finding days in advance a quiet space. The interviewer, this may only be their second virtual interview. And if there's dirty laundry or a flag or something in the background, it might be distracting, and the interviewer will lose the conversation. They'd be distracted. So always control your environment as much as possible. In certain situations happen, right? We all know that, and being flexible. I would also say tone of the interview too. In the past, virtual interviews tend to be a bit more casual because, especially for IPG Mediabrands, this is the only way we're interviewing now. We are virtually onboarding and starting to hire again. It is as serious, so step it up. If they're not already, dress code definitely with the, whatever. I would research the company. If it's ad tech, it might be a little bit different, but it's better to be overdressed than underdressed for things like this. With this current environment, we just don't know. So they want to be prepared and feel confident and comfortable. And then going back to the background, right? I really think it is a funny story. I was on the call with the team at Marketing Edge, and I saw a pillow off. I was like, oh no, I have to practice what I preach. But it's true. You want as least distraction as possible so that you're able to digest the information that you're discussing. So I'll leave that on a little bit, and we can always go back to it too if anybody wants to see it again. So how do I gain experience in the current job market? What a question, right? Like, how you're telling me it's 25% unemployment rate. I'm going against the odds. What am I supposed to do? You know what? It's thinking outside the box. So internships, shadowships, microships. These are all terms that I'm sure you've heard. If not, now you are, and you'll start to see these themes emerging. So internships, virtual internships, whether they're for a few weeks or for a semester, encourage the students to really look into those. Companies are still offering them, especially now that we're hopefully coming out of COVID and going back into the offices, but even virtually as well. Shadowships, some of our agencies are taking on students for maybe a week to 2 weeks, and they're virtually shadowing people and having those conversations and attending some curated webinars. And then microships too. There's a lot of websites now that are dedicated to students to get microships. So essentially it's, basic freelance work, a few hours they get paid for, but it's dedicated to that student population. It helps them gain that experience and those things to put on their resume and help them identify, some of their interests and passions maybe they know they didn't have. Another thing I would highly suggest, and I'm sure this is a no-brainer, certifications, right? If you've got a marketing student or you've got an accounting student or somebody who needs to boost a certain skill like Excel or Google Analytics, now is the time to do it. Do it at night, take the course. Even there's so many courses now on LinkedIn and eCornell that they could do with certifications that can kind of give them one step ahead, especially because they aren't able to get that. And when they get the question, well, what are you doing because you're not employed? These are the types of things that they can say, hey, I've gone and done this on my own. Recruiting agencies and freelance. I do have a soft spot for recruiting agencies. I was with Robert Half for quite a while. But one thing we really have the ability to do, they cast a wide net with their clients. So if there is any kind of freelance work, especially agencies that specialize in accounting or in art or something like that, they are able to have a pulse, and they do have those temp opportunities, whether they're in-house, you go on site depending on the city you are, or they are virtual. And especially right now, because a lot of organizations are not hiring, they may have the ability to bring on some temp work. So it's a great way to gain experience. And freelance work as well, right? I think that keeping an open mind to that will help them gain exposure and experience. Another big one, volunteering. Different organizations, different nonprofits in your city, in your town, may need help with their social media page, may need help with their accounting. I'm using accounting and marketing because those are my two worlds, right? But a number of things, that experience and that exposure, they can still use that as experience. Silver lining, you're still getting it either way. So then when that job does come, you're armed and ready to go. And professional organizations get involved, American Market Association, Toastmasters, even if they've graduated, alumni networks. This is the time now more than ever to join virtual communities and be able to really leverage those relationships and partnerships, right? I think 60% of all hires, this is a LinkedIn statistic, one of my favorites, are done through referrals. This is how you meet the people in order to get to those opportunities maybe you wouldn't have otherwise found. So I can't stress it enough. Have your students, and maybe there's local ones that are even better too, and national ones are great, but if you're in Chicago and there's one specific to the Chicago industry, then I would encourage them to do that. And then finally, really be open to opportunities. I will say that, even recruiting last year, students had such a different perspective. If you go back to that slide, the 3.7%, they had the world was their oyster. It's just not the case anymore. So the whole reason I shared my story was to help you understand that even in the worst of times, you can identify silver lining, you can identify your passions through other projects, other jobs, and eventually get to where you want to be, and maybe not even realize you wanted to be there on the way. So, it's about the journey as much as the destination, but really just be open to any opportunity. And, let's be realistic. A lot of these students are coming out with loans, and they're gonna have to pay the bills. So find the silver lining in that. I know I was definitely one of those. So that's it. That's the presentation. I really enjoyed speaking with you guys. If you have any questions, I don't know. I know that we've got the chat box going on the side. Happy to answer. And there we are.